Greetings and salutations one and all, this is Darro here and I present to you my Games of 2012 extravaganza. This is going to be split into two parts now, where the first part is going to be my honourable mentions. Games that I enjoyed to an extent but just didn't quite make the cut from my overall top 10 games of 2012, which will show up for you for your viewing pleasure later on in the week. But first of all, let's get going. I liked Final Fantasy 13 2 more than Final Fantasy 13. Reasons are, the story I felt was a lot better. A lot of people really liked the story in Final Fantasy 13, but unfortunately for me, I don't think it was all that. I enjoyed it though because it dealt with time travel, and I pretty much am kind of like certain things that deal with time travel. I love Back to the Future, I love Chrono Trigger, and games that deal with time travel I tend to like, and this is one of those ones. It still has the great battle system that you've come to know and love from Final Fantasy 13, but a few little extra changes. It has an interesting villain called Chaos, who I felt was one of the more interesting villains in Final Fantasy history. And also, it sort of fixed most of the problems people had with 13. It's more open world, it's not really fully linear, you can go through different areas, you don't need to explore whatsoever, but if you want to explore everything in this game you can. And it just feels to me it's a better game in my honest opinion than 13 was. The reason why Kingdoms of Amalur are reckoning this is here because I just didn't play too much of it though to garner a top 10 position. And that's a damn shame because this actually was one of my most anticipated games of 2012. I thought I was going to really get into this game, but unfortunately I got left to the side for other games. But what I played of it though, the 15 to 20 hours I played of it though, I still enjoyed. I thought it's a very enjoyable game. The combat's cool, the different powers you obtain, the various weapons you obtain, and just using certain weapons to kill certain enemies just looks so badass and all that there. And the story for what I played of it though seemed interesting enough. And if you like games that sort of have plenty of side quests and you feel like overwhelmness, you're definitely going to get it here because there are plenty of side quests to do, plenty of guild quests, there's plenty of stuff to do, and you're going to be spending a lot of time in this game. But I just didn't spend enough toward the decision. Darkness 2 is the follow-up to Darkness, of course, and this one is done by a different developer than from like Starbreeze in the first one. This one's done by Digital Extremes. And I really still enjoyed this one. It fixes certain problems from the first one though. The Darkness have cool new powers, and also the way they kill people is absolutely awesome, as you can see here. One of the main problems I had, unfortunately though, the main killer is the game is just too short for my liking. You can easily finish this game in about 5 hours though. And it's a damn shame though because I wanted to play more of it. It just seemed to get going though and all of a sudden ends. And I wish it was longer though because that is probably the biggest fault I've had with this game. Everything else is pretty cool, like the graphics look nice, the gameplay is just balls to the wall nuts. The co-op where you can play with friends and do a bunch of missions for you, like Jackie, it's very enjoyable as well. And there is possibly going to be a third one which I am all for because I like to see more from this world of Jackie Estacado and the Darkness. You think the makers of Yakuza couldn't make a competent third-person shooter that closely resembles Gears of War? Well, you'd be wrong because that's exactly what they did with Binary Domain. Binary Domain is actually a pretty good competent third-person shooter that closely resembles Gears of War. Gears of War with robots more like. The way you kill certain robots is pretty cool though. Some of the boss battles are very, enjoyable indeed. The graphic looks pretty cool, but one of the most unique things about this game is the way you communicate with your party. There's certain actions or certain things you can do to actually increase their trust level or decrease them depending on how you respond to them whenever they ask you a question or whatnot. And it's cool as well. You can actually use the headset for it though, but unfortunately that doesn't work half the time. But it's a very good game and has a very good, it's a pretty cool story at the end of the day. I was very much looking forward to Mass Effect 3. But unfortunately I end up being disappointed with Mass Effect 3. One of the main reasons is that the story in it is it's just not as good as Mass Effect 2 in my honest opinion. And I'm not one of those ones that got really pissed off at the ending or, you know, threatened, you know, BioWare or EA now. I'm just one of those ones who said I felt a bit indifferent to it. And after looking at after looking at the DLC stuff and sort of stuff that sort of came from the DLC, it really should have been in the main game. So in certain aspects, you kind of got a half-finished game. You got half of the experience, and that's kind of shoddy in a way. But it's still a good game though. It's just not as fun, as good as 2 overall. The story is kind of the same though. You recruit races this time instead of soldiers. And the side quest stuff is very lazy. They're definitely not as good as 2 whatsoever. The multiplayer is decent enough, but overall I just felt it's a bit of a step back towards 2. Maybe because of the rush job. Lollipop Chainsaw! Yes, another crazy action game done by the mind of Suda51. And I enjoyed this game, but probably not as much as I've done with previous Suda51 games like, you know, No More Heroes or Shadows of the Dam from 2011. But this one's still a very, you know, competent, you know, enjoyable third person, like, you know, hack and slash action game anyway. You basically play as a girl who goes around killing zombies with a chainsaw around high school and other locations. Very fun indeed to play through. But unfortunately, it does get pretty repetitive. It's kind of a one-trick pony though at the end of the day. And that's part of the reason why it's just not in my top 10 though. So it's just a good game though, but just definitely not enjoyable enough to put in the top 10. And it's not really a long game. It's probably one of those games. If you're one of those ones who wants to go back and try to compete in leaderboards and try to get the high score, probably good, but not for me. Spec Ops: The Line. The only reason why this is here is because of the story. The gameplay is, you know, adequate enough now. It's, you know, it's just standard, you know, third-person shooting, you know, standard third-person cover shooter. But the story is where it sort of matters here. It's a very interesting story. I don't know if it's like absolutely fantastic though. But if you can try the game out for the story itself though, because it's sort of very different to your sort of standard war, you know, war stories you expect from, you know, third-person shooters or first-person shooters. It's very dark though, and the way your main character sort of melts down into insanity the further he goes along. And there's a very good sort of twist at the end, and many people, you know, sort of basically make the story similar to the one from a certain film that was released. I'll give you the initials AN. It sort of closely resembles that particular film. But it's a very enjoyable, it's a very sort of, you know, interesting story at the end of the day. Sleeping Dogs. This would have been on my top 10 probably, no doubt, if I actually played more of it than I did though. I didn't want to put it in my top 10s because I didn't put nearly enough time into this game. But I've actually gone back to it now, and what I've gotten is a very enjoyable, very good open world sandbox game. You know what you're getting in this kind of game, because if you played, you know, Grand Theft Auto, Saints Row and the like from years gone by, then you know what you're getting here. But it's a very good game. The combat is pretty awesome. The game looks gorgeous in the PC. The way the rain works is just fantastic. And it's very enjoyable just to drive around and explore Hong Kong, the neon lights, and some of the action sequences, some of the missions I feel are a lot more enjoyable than they are in, you know, Grand Theft Auto 4. You know, chase missions and the gunfire and the way you drive around is pretty cool though. And overall, it's just a very enjoyable game, and the story is very, you know, it's very enjoyable at the end of the day. Just wish I played more of it to warrant the position. I enjoyed Transformers War for Cybertron back in 2010, and this is the follow-up to that game. And this is still a very good game in my honest opinion. It's just a very competent, you know, third-person shooter, third-person sort of action shooter. You play as, of course, the Transformers. You play as some of the Decepticons, like, you know, Starscream, Megatron, Bruticus and the like, and you also play as some of the Autobots, you know, Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, Jazz, etc. And the campaign, it's very, you know, I actually enjoyed the campaign for what it was. I actually didn't touch the multiplayer in this, but I'm sure it was, you know, it'd be enjoyable enough as well. But I still enjoyed this game, just not as much as not, you know, unfortunately, and not so much as to warrant a top 10 position. But at the end of the day, I still enjoyed it. It's a very good game and very nice looking on the PC. Hell yeah! All I can say is, hell yeah! This game is pretty great. And this is probably to me is one of those overlooked Xbox Live Arcade games this year. It didn't really do good in the review department from what I saw, and that's a shame because what you get here I feel is a pretty, you know, crazy action platformer, and certain parts of it actually closely is just pretty cool. The way he dealt with the sort of enemies in the game, certain enemies in the game are pretty cool. It's like these little wee mini games. So you have to press the thing at the right time or not there. But it's a very cool game and a very cool art style. Definitely check it out. Assassin's Creed 3, like Mass Effect 3, ended up being pretty much another disappointment. And it ended up being, for a lot of people, a disappointment. And it's not an overly bad game, it's just certain things about it that are not so great. The story in it is, you know, interesting enough though. There is certain good things about the story though. Some of the characters are alright, but it's just not as good. It's just not as refined as, you know, previous entries in the series like 2 or Brotherhood though. The colonial America setting, while cool and all, is just, you know, it's probably not as fun to explore like it was in, you know, the Italian cities or in 2 and Brotherhood and the like. But what you get here is still a very good game. The combat's still pretty awesome. It still looks very nice despite some of the glitches you expect to come along the way. But there are certain missions that get annoying. The chase missions are quite annoying. There's a lot of stealth, which are quite annoying as well. But still a good game. WWE 13 is the best wrestling game in my honest opinion since WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. And that game came out 9 years ago. And it's taken them this long to actually make a game that's actually sort of near on par with that game. It's still not probably as good as that game, but it's pretty close. And one of the main reasons is the Attitude Era mode. That sort of goes through the events of some more infamous events that came from the Attitude Era mode, which pretty much is the sort of defining era of wrestling in the, you know, the 90s. I absolutely love playing through it. Apart from a few inaccuracies though, it's a very good mode indeed. And the wrestling's pretty good as well. It's still, you know, not great, but it's a lot better than what it was. And finally, Halo 4. Halo 4, of course, is probably one of those games a lot of people are looking forward to. And for me, yes, I enjoy the Halo series now, but not to the extent of, you know, so other people are. But what you got here, I thought is like it's a good, you know, entry into the series. I think the campaign, I played it in co-op entirely, I thought it was pretty good. It's not the best in the series in my honest opinion, unlike some people say. It gets quite repetitive though. You don't face a lot of, you know, varied enemies. You still face the, you know, you still face the Covenant unfortunately though. But the new enemies, the Prometheans, are pretty cool at the end of the day. It looks gorgeous. That is one of the things I have to, you know, commend it for. It's absolutely gorgeous game. One of the best looking console games of 2012. And the multiplayer is still good though, and overall it's still a good package for your Halo fans out there. And that is it for this part of my games of 2012. Stay tuned for part 2 where I go through my top 10 games of 2012. What will be number 1? Stay tuned folks, and I'll see you next time.